So that's a big one, right? That's like, hey, Minutemen need armored vehicles. They're like $300,000. They're, get a group together, do a group buy, whatever.
Right.
It's kind of it's a very like far out concept to think about, but that's how big I want us as a company to be thinking. Get your 8 buddies, save up, buy one, train with it, know how to use it, maintain it, have a couple of you are mechanics. People aren't ready for that, right? But that's how big I want people in the company to be thinking, and that's how big I'm thinking is, hey, what can we do in 5 years, and what should the community have access to is really how I look at things. I think backwards. I go, what is optimal community, like access to equipment or gear, and then what do we need to do to get there?
One of the interesting things that as we've been chatting, it's sort of the through thread across people who know TRX Arms and what you guys have done is how you've influenced gun culture really in the last 10 years you guys have existed since you started the company in the garage and through media and such. A story that comes to mind is I moved to now Texas, but I moved to Texas from Minnesota a year and a half ago. Mm-hmm. Went to the local gun store right as I moved here to buy some ammo. Talking and checking out, young kid, maybe 21, is checking me out, and he's like, "Oh, are you going to go shooting?" I said, "Oh, I'm new to Dallas. Where should I shoot? Do you have any recommendation?" Right. And he's like, "Well, I actually don't know any ranges in Dallas." And I'm like, "But I shoot a lot." I'm like, "Oh, interesting. Tell me about that." He's like, "Well, have you heard of Lucas Botkin at TRX Army?" I'm like, "Of course I've heard of Lucas." And he's like, "Well, yeah. So me and my friends all go outside of Dallas, where there's land, and we run a gun, shoot, do transitions, all this stuff." So he's like, "So I don't know anything about flat ranges and indoor ranges in Dallas. Don't ask me any questions." And I was like, "Well, I'm into the same style of shooting. So where do you go?" Anyway, so I think that's sort of if I think of like TRX Arms, like that's the influence that you guys, you've driven a lot of that. Yeah, that way. Why don't you talk a little bit about how that's come about and how you see it from your side?
Yeah. So when I first got into firearms back in, I want to say it was 2011, I had the Magpul DVDs, which was like, that's all there was the Magpul Dynamics training DVDs that came out in, I think, 2010, that sort of era. And before that point, I knew about guns. I had sort of shot them, but I didn't know that there was a whole nother sort of level to owning firearms and shooting with them, like actually training and shooting multiple targets and trying to shoot a little bit faster. And so when I watched the Magpul DVDs, I was exposed to that, and I was like, oh, there's more you can actually do with guns than just carrying it, which I knew a lot of people who carried guns, but I never saw them train. I only saw them carry. So I saw those DVDs, yeah, right. And I got influenced. I was like, okay, cool. I should shoot a little bit faster, do some things. So then I had an AR-15 with a 22 conversion bolt, and I would go out and shoot. I was shooting logs and stuff, but I was trying to be fast. I was trying to be a little more deliberate. But when I actually started going online and trying to learn more, there wasn't really anything out there back in 2012. There were some, I think Hickok 45, there were a couple of YouTubers out there, but they pretty much just talked about guns. They didn't actually shoot them. They didn't run and gun with them. They didn't do anything like action-y. They didn't do anything training-wise, in my opinion, and at the time. And so I wanted that. I knew that's what I wanted. I wanted some faster-paced training. And then when I started the company, I started going and shooting pistol competitions where you have to run around and shoot if you want to do well. So that's where I started to actually do some of that and see other people move and shoot and do some things. And then it was shortly after that, probably 6 months, it was about a year in, I think. I was like, well, I'm going to make that content. I'm going to make the content that I was looking for that didn't exist. With education, product pages with photos, which I was trying to do for our holster pages, and then just with the shooting content that I started putting on Instagram was I'm actually going to show training and actually show shooting. I'm not just going to shoot standing still. I'm not just going to shoot from a bench. I actually want to run and gun, and show some of that. And then YouTube, I think I started YouTube about a year after that or 2 years after that. And the first few videos was running and gunning. And they were really the first of their kind back in 2015. There wasn't a lot of training content on YouTube, or I'd say demonstration content. A lot of it was review stuff, unboxings, and that's just not what I was looking for. And thankfully, there were a lot of people like me looking for that type of content who wanted to watch it, and it blew up. They weren't content with just watching unboxings. They wanted to see what training looks like and could look like. And it's actually been really interesting, even looking at the gun community now, or gun culture now, even going to YouTube. Most reviewers out there for firearms, they still do the review portion of the video talking about a specific gun, but they show shooting for their B-roll. They actually show some running and gunning. They show some semblance of training. It's not always super productive shooting. I might just be shooting into a berm or into trash, but they're trying to show more than what was being done back in 2013. And I think that some of that has been the result of our content on YouTube and some other people. But yeah, standards are definitely higher for what people are looking for with shooting content, which I think is cool. And now I'm kind of trying to look at, well, what's next? If content's gotten to this point where there is action-y footage, there's running and gunning, there's training, well, what's the next step for content? Is it maybe more in-depth testing? Is it more in-depth training? Is it, group training? Instead of just having one content creator, having multiple. So we're exploring some of that right now to see what the next phase is. But it's definitely, the shooting community has definitely developed nicely. And I attribute a lot of it to the early days of YouTube, basically forcing that evolution, because a lot of people are in the content game. And when your content stops getting watched because it's boring, you kind of have to, either retire, be forcibly retired, or up your game and change your content. So that's been cool.
Yeah. Do you think about the YouTube content as a product in and of itself, that you're thinking about it as a product line, or are you thinking about it as just totally integrated as a flag for the main business?
It is definitely its own entity, and that's what a lot of people don't understand about Trex. Is most people find Trex through YouTube. Like, that is hands down. When I get recognized in public, in the airport, at a restaurant, wherever it is, 99% of the time it's, hey, I watch your videos. It's not, hey, I buy from your company. You make this really cool thing. It's always like, I watch your videos. It's like almost always what it is. And so the majority of the people find our company through YouTube. And I was at Fort Bragg for a work thing I think it was like 2 years ago. And I remember being in a team room with a bunch of instructors for one of these special forces schools. And a couple of them went, wait, you guys make holsters? And I was like, well, yes, that's actually how the company got started. They thought it was just YouTube. That's all they watched. That's all they saw. That's all they heard people talking about. So a lot of people think Trex is a YouTube company, YouTube channel, but that's actually a very small part of the business in terms of personnel and effort and what's going on compared to the manufacturing and the retail side, our relationship with vendors. But it's a very important part. We have a disproportionate amount of marketing capability to the size of company we are. There's companies that are 6 times our size with almost no footprint when it comes to social media marketing or getting their message out to people. And then there's us. We're a smaller company compared to them, but we have a massive platform for reaching people. I was just looking at numbers with one of my guys, and on Instagram alone, it's reaching 9 million people in a quarter. And most companies are not doing that. They can't do that. So that's been interesting, managing that asset or that resource. So I do view YouTube as its own sort of product, how we kind of shape it and what messages we put out. And very rarely is it driven by our products. I usually want to focus on content I want to make or what I think people need to hear. And then every once in a while it's oh, hey, I've got to do a video on this product that we're selling. Oh no, that kind of sucks because I'm not a good salesman. I'd rather talk about training or, what I think people need to hear, financial responsibility. That's coming up, but which that's gonna ruffle some.
Not dropping 40K on 40K on nods.
Yeah, don't do that
for fun.
But hey, I can say that because I have done that, and I can tell people it's not worth it. So I can speak from authority on that. But so yeah, it's definitely its own, arm of the company. But it does support everything in its own way, which is interesting.
Do you find that other manufacturers, other vendors now just lean on you guys to do the in-depth marketing as opposed to, why even bother? Like, I mean, like we were just saying before, you guys do some of the most in-depth, and this is amazing as a purchaser, as a customer, some of the most in-depth, write-ups on products and videos on how to set them up and use them out in the industry, like by far. Do you find that vendors just rely on you guys and do your own thing? We won't even bother and just leave it up to you.
There are a couple in the last couple years. I have noticed that from a couple people. It took a while for some vendors to recognize that or realize that, but as soon as we started selling, a lot of their product and got their attention, like one of the big ones was Trigicon. We brought the ACOG back. And when we put out the video on the ACOG a year ago, and we had some content before then, their sales for ACOGs went up everywhere. It wasn't just from our company. It was all vendors everywhere in the industry. And then we started talking to them about some other things, and they started asking us questions about other products because they saw what we could do for a product that was 20 years old, 30 years old. I think it's actually a little bit older than 30 years old, and bring that back to being popular and interesting to people. And there have been a couple conversations with companies where I'm sitting there and we're in a meeting or something, and I'm like, oh, you want us to go out and do a video on your product so you don't have to. And that's cool. Like, That's cool on one side, but like I wish more companies would put more effort into their own stuff and not rely on, influencers or YouTube channels or ambassadors or whatever to do it for them. There's a time and a place for that to reach new people and different demographics. But man, the gun industry is very behind on educating their own customers directly. And so there have been a few meetings like that where they're definitely leaning on us to kind of pull some of the weight. And that's just because so many of these companies are propped up either by government contracts where the marketing's different. It's just a different business model. Right. And they focus so much on their dealers that they don't really have to market like to the consumer. That's kind of where Trex comes in. Like, we market to the consumer only. Like, we don't market to dealers. We don't market to the government. Mm-hmm. We only do the consumers. And most of these companies don't do that. They just focus on government contracts, their existing dealers, maybe it's a dozen, and that's about it. That's all they have to do is just kind of keep those relationships up, keep making product, make sure they don't lose a contract that results in them firing 20% of their staff, and they just keep going. And it's kind of on people like us and other influencers to do the consumer marketing.
No, so that's cool. I'm curious about your thoughts on the audience too, like sort of the timing with the audience. I think we're all the same age, grew up with Call of Duty 4, Halo 3. That generation where you're playing those games one year, and then like 5-6 years later, you're like, well, maybe I could actually buy this gun, and then you can run out and do some of the stuff that was sort of in the movie/video games. So how do you think about the audience? Do you see that as an interesting time to build this, like sort of fortuitous in that way?
For sure. The year 2000 from 10 to 20 was definitely a cash-in period for video games. Were very developed, or they were getting very developed from 2000 to 2010. A lot of shooters. It was the first time you could really run around. I think Castle Wolfenstein came out in 1993, I want to say. Doom came out in 1993. I got a Doom shirt on. Well, T-Rex Doom shirt. But nice. It came out in 1993, so that was a shooter, very simplistic. It wasn't until like 2000 that you could actually play a shooter and look up and down and around and do stuff. And so I do think enough of that, getting people in that generation when they're 15, 14, and then, hey, they're 18, they're 20, going into 2010 was definitely it was a very, very good timing for the market, for the firearms industry. Right now, what I'm seeing is not as much of a spike in the current youth growing up with all those games. It's kind of like games nowadays suck. I study the video game industry a lot because it affects culture more than movies does, to be perfectly honest. And when you have games like Fortnite where all the guns are kind of like, they're all kind of the same and you don't really know what they are and they all look kind of weird and they're all cartoony. It does not have the same effect on people being interested or intrigued by a firearm than Modern Warfare, like the original, like COD 4 when it first came out and was one of the first like shooter games you could use a real firearm and it looked good and it felt good and it recoiled properly, unlike some of the early Rainbow Six games. And so I think some of that is, we're not going to see that again with future generations because, you've got access to whatever game you want. You can play anything. You can have any gun. It's every game's Michael Bay. Explosions everywhere. Some of the tech doesn't have to be as good as it used to be to make people interested. Games are just lazy nowadays, and I think that does affect some of how inspired people are in what's going on in the game. So I do think there was definitely some providence in the timing for when I started T-Rex and cashed in on that a little bit. I think it'll be harder for some companies. 2020 to 2030, it'll require something else to get people interested in firearms or unique firearms for that matter. Because I definitely see it with Gen Z or Gen X or whatever we're in. They're just not as interested in certain kinds of guns like my generation was for like the ACR and MP5 SDs and some of the older retro guns. And Gen Z people are just kind of like, well, that's the gun from Fortnite, and they don't have the same relationship with that object that they had growing up with it. So there's probably more to be said there that I need to think more about, but I'm definitely seeing it with kids that are 20 versus kids my age, 30.
Right.
There's definitely a different level of interest or intrigue into firearms than there have been, the last decade.
Yeah, that's interesting. I mean, I feel like what you just said is interesting. I went hunting a couple weeks ago, and I was given a rifle to hunt with, and it was a Remington 700, and immediately I was like, coddle to the floor, bro.
Exactly.
Like, I remember playing with this gun. And this is the first time I'm going to hunt with this. This is sick. That's my reference point.
Yep.
Yeah. And there's another strange, like darker version of this, which is now there's all this first person footage coming out of Ukraine and Israel and other places. And we're at like a really weird point where you can actually see people using weapons in real conflicts from a first-person perspective, which I don't know what impact that is going to have, but it will have some sort of an impact, just globally.
Mm-hmm.
It will. The people like to talk about the desensitization of video games and violence and all that. And personally, I don't. Well, one, I think a level of desensitization is a good thing. I mean, if you look at history, people growing up back in the early 1900s had to deal with death and all sorts of problematic issues. I mean, times were definitely harder than they are now. Or even if you want to go back to the medieval era, like Black Plague rolling through, your family's all killed and you're the only one left over. I mean, there were some hard things people had to deal with back then that we don't have to deal with right now. And so I think a level of desensitization can be a good thing just for living your life. And the claim that video games does that for people, I don't see it. Video games did not make me desensitized to being a firefighter. I had to go out and see bodies and see the carnage of wrecks and actually respond to that, like physically and psychologically as well. Video games didn't do that for me. Seeing animals butchered growing up did that. Then going to car wrecks did that. I think war footage can be different though. When like I remember one of the first pieces of footage I saw that really hit me from Ukraine was a helicopter going down. And I remember seeing the footage, and I knew it wasn't Arma. It was realistic footage because there was a lot of fake stuff that came out then. Mm-hmm. And I remember seeing it go down, and I remember feeling like a hit to my heart. I was like, oh, those people are dead, like they're gone, like in that explosion. And the footage was high quality. It's very current. It happened like 2 days before probably. It was just much more impactful to me, and I still remember it than playing video games. Like nothing in video games has ever impacted me on the same level psychologically with life and death than seeing footage from Ukraine or what's going on in Israel right now. So it is different. I really do think it is different. Like very different. I don't know what that's going to do for people, whether that's going to make them value human life more or less. Then again, I think people value human life very little right now since they don't care about abortion and they think it's fine. So once you cross that Rubicon, I mean, does human life really matter for a lot of people? And I don't think it does. If people have really crossed that bridge of, hey, abortion's fine, it's perfectly acceptable. Do you even value the lives of other people? I would question that. So I don't know. It'll be interesting to see what happens in a year or two, probably longer, a decade of having access to that war footage. Because it didn't exist as much back in the early 2000s with GWAT. No. You had to know someone with a GoPro, and you were not allowed to film back then. Like it was much more kept under wraps, but you had to know someone and they would leak it to you and then you'd see it and it was grainy and you couldn't really see what's going on. Now it's HD, 1080p, possibly even 4K. Yeah, I don't know. I know what it's done for me. It has given me a much more profound respect for war itself and how horrible and scary it is. Seeing that, and I think being married has done that too. Like now I have a reason to live now, which sounds kind of weird, but I feel like, hey, I'm married now. I have a reason to be alive and not just, to die for something, stupid or whatever. And then seeing the footage, I know what it made me feel like, but I can't obviously speak to that for other people, especially young people. But
yeah,
it's very profound.
Yeah, it is certainly interesting. I mean, for a while, like the highest quality footage of AC-130 gunship was the mission from Modern Warfare, from Call of Duty 4. In a sense. And then like the recordings and everything catch up. It becomes footage becomes more widespread. And now the stuff you see is just insanely high quality. So there's a lot of people watching, again, everything from war footage, playing video games, watching your content and the content of other guys like Mike Jones and other folks. I noticed this recently, maybe it's a recent change, but I noticed on the site you guys now talk about equipping serious citizens, something I hadn't seen before. Of the broad audience that's out there in the gamer / airsoft / just watching YouTube videos, what is the core audience that you are after, that you want to speak to?
So we're still defining that. It's a great question, but you kind of hit on it though. Serious citizens. So our mission here at Trex since really the beginning, and it's evolved. Like it wasn't like if you had asked me back in 2013, hey, do you really know what you're doing here? Do you really have a formulated opinion on the Second Amendment and how important it is and all this stuff? No, I had to mature in those things as time went on, and other people have been involved in crafting the vision for the company as well. But we are trying to be a very mature company when it comes to the messages and the ideology we put out there. We're not here to just please as many people as possible with our content and not upset people and be friendly with everyone and attract the most people possible. That's really not something we're trying to do as a company. We're trying to lead boldly with our mission and our core values. And we know that mission and those core values will turn some people away. And so the equipping serious citizens part, we kind of landed on that. We still discuss it back and forth. It's people who are serious about their responsibilities to their fellow countrymen, to the people around them. And they're not just sitting back like, hey, the responsibility of protecting people, that's for the state to do. That's for my neighbor, someone else to do. I don't really care. I'm just going to work my job, come home and play on the Xbox or whatever. Like we are seeking out the people that are more serious about, working hard to make this country greater. They're interested in being involved in their local politics. They are interested in taking the responsibility of protecting themselves and other people very seriously and training somewhat regularly. I don't expect people to train as much as I do. I mean, it's part of my job, and I'm also just a nerd for it. But they're more serious than just the people who carry a gun on Sunday to church. They want to live it is really who we're going after. And we actually have sort of a process of how we evaluate certain decisions and certain kinds of products. We've got and we sort of break it down into, so there's citizens broadly, which is anyone in the country doing whatever. They might be interested in guns, they might not. They probably aren't yet, or maybe they own a gun. And then they cross over into the concerned citizen territory when they see what's going on and they go, hey, I should probably carry a gun. I should probably buy an AR-15. I need to be a little bit more serious about what's going on. That's when they cross over into the concerned citizen territory. There's a lot of people in that. I'd say the majority. It's sort of a funnel is what I'm describing. When they cross over into the serious citizen category, I kind of have that for the people that are like, nope, I want to train. I want to be able to teach other people, educate other people. I understand why this is important. I'm willing to die for certain things. I'm not just going to go with the flow of whatever, is going on. They're a little more serious. And then after that, it crosses over into potentially, we're still discussing it, but sort of the militia category, people who are more involved in the unorganized or organized militia. And then we have some discussion here at work on, is there a difference between the militia and minutemen? And that would be one category. below that, so continuing down the funnel, Minutemen would be the people that are well-funded, very serious, training regularly, better equipment. They're very physically fit. They're more capable of doing certain things, which is who the Minutemen were back during, 1775, back during the war for our independence. And so that's sort of a model that we come back to pretty often when we're selecting products. It's who's this for? Is this for the concerned citizen? Is this for the Minuteman? Is this for the serious citizen? Because we are trying to classify different kinds of customers, into different pools, because, not everyone is in a certain part of the journey of being a gun owner. There's different parts of the process. And it's important to recognize that, especially when you're trying to do marketing and produce content, because not everyone is as serious about shooting as I am. They're not.
Right.
And that's fine. They may just want to own a gun, shoot once a month, put it in the closet, go back to work, but have it ready to go. And that's great. That's fine. We want to serve those people. But we are most interested in that serious category, the people that are willing to assist with the fight ideologically is really how I would put it, and be involved and not just be a consumer. And so, and we're still discussing this quite a lot, is really who are we trying to go after? And but really the main thing for us is we're not trying to market to as many people as possible, be the most agreeable company to buy from, never state what we believe. Like we're not about that. Like I like to make it very known what we believe, partly so certain people don't buy from us because I'm just not that interested in supporting them. But also so our customers aren't shocked or surprised when I come out and say, hey, we're a pro-life company. And then they want to, flame us on Reddit or return stuff. It's like, no, they should know who they're buying from, for their sake and ours. Like they should know who they're supporting. And so that's always fun whenever we put out a statement and people get upset. And then usually it's 90% like us even more.
Right.
It's usually how it works, but
yeah,
it's interesting.
No, that is interesting. So I did a couple of American Milsim events.
Oh, cool. Yeah.
A couple of years ago, and it was interesting to me how many young guys there were, but younger than I am. They were 18 at the time. I was like 28, 27. So they're, in the Twitterverse and in the sort of online, there's the red-pilled manosphere influencers like Jordan Peterson and those kinds of guys that a lot of those young guys are listening to. But one subset of that I don't think a lot of people are aware, unless you're into guns or in the gun community, is guys like you and Mike Jones and other folks. And it was interesting to me how many of these young men were talking about, we're at the event playing airsoft or whatever, but it was in this concept, or they were framing that, attending that event in a broader sort of still shaky, but broader understanding of their responsibilities as men and what their duties were, especially, and this was outside of Minneapolis, where there's American Milsim events, right? Especially in the context of what was going on in the city at the time, like, further decline, further decay, more chaos, more crime, whatnot. And these young guys were like, there's something wrong about this. And it feels like the way they were articulating in various ways was like, I kind of feel like it's my job to just be ready. Yeah. And so they were looking at various sources and it was sort of awakening or shaping, honing, directing, if you would, the instinct that they had in many ways suppressed, to just take ownership and have agency over. And it was very locally focused. Like my family, my mom, some of these guys didn't have dads, so they're like, yeah, I live in downtown Minneapolis, and I want to know that I'm ready if I need to protect my mom. It was just very interesting.
It's really good, yeah.
Contrast that with like a colleague at the time that I had a conversation with, much more on the liberal side. We were talking about guns, and we started talking about guns because this was again in Minneapolis. And 5 seconds into the conversation, we're technically talking about guns, but it becomes evidently obvious that we're actually disagreeing on like the fundamental nature of reality. Like, what are men for? What are the duties of men? What are guys supposed to do? And like he doesn't disagree. He doesn't disagree with me on guns. He disagrees with me on what is a man, right? And so it was. For some guys, this is going to be a huge turnoff. For others, they're going to be drawn to this message.
Yeah, it's funny you bring that up, because obviously in the process of us leading as boldly as we can with our ideology and what we believe, and I just got into it on talking about financial responsibility, which money is a hugely emotional subject for people, which I understand. But it's always interesting whenever I bring stuff up and people accuse me of starting drama, because they don't understand that content creators and businesses don't all agree on things. They think we're all supposed to just get along. And so I try to point out to people like, no, I don't align with anyone 100%. Like no one, probably not even my wife, 100% on everything. We're going to disagree on things at times. And I'm absolutely going to disagree with how companies do conduct business, how they treat the community, how other content creators conduct their business, and how they treat their followers. Like there are going to be disagreements, and they're going to disagree with me publicly. Like this is just how life works. It's different with the internet because that is kind of a new thing, seeing people disagree with each other publicly, and then everyone kind of gets to chime in and take sides. And like that's a very new thing for society in general. It hasn't really ever existed in history that I know of. The internet has definitely changed things, but people don't understand that that's normal. Like confrontation and people disagreeing is very normal. And I'm probably the most outspokenly one of the most outspoken people in the firearms industry. So I get accused of drama the most because I just say what I believe. But it is interesting seeing how many people just don't get that, kind of like what you're talking about. Like there's these fundamental things they don't understand about being a man, which one of them is you have convictions, you know what you believe, and you stand by them. You're willing to hear the other side and possibly change if you realize it makes more sense, it's more logical, more practical, or it's maybe religiously more correct or whatever. But you also have your own convictions. You've actually sat down, thought about them, and you'll stand by them. So it's just funny with how many people I see complain about accountability and drama online, also be pro-gun and Second Amendment. And I'm like, hey, if you can't handle two men disagreeing on the internet about a thing, and you can't handle that because you like both of them, there's no way you're going to show up with your rifle for a Second Amendment purpose in the future and take a stand. There's no way you have the maturity or the mental capacity to be able to do that if you're upset by two men disagreeing on the internet, which is just the internet. Like it's a medium of content. Like, yes, it's the town square, but like, yeah, it's very interesting. And I bring it up all the time. The gun community is not a community. It's not unified because we don't all agree on, what men are for, what the Second Amendment is even for, religious values. I mean, the only thing that ties us together is the love of firearms. That's it. That's all we have. I see it all the time at like airsoft events or whatever. I mean, you'll have the communist, like straight up pro-communist gun owner milsim group. And then we're over here, obviously not communist, and we're technically on the same side, but it's like we are not on the same side at all. And people don't get that. They think just loving guns is enough, and that is not how it works. But it's just very interesting.
No, that is very interesting. I'm curious. I've wondered this for a while along these lines. How has this translated to relationships between you guys and other manufacturers and vendors? Because my impression as somebody on the outside of the gun industry is that, again, it's sort of very divided. There's the new blood that is very openly stands for particular values and a vision, whereas particularly some of the old monolithic manufacturers, vendors in the gun industry are played very safe. How does that work internally?
You described it pretty well. It's actually these smaller companies that make rash moves more often. So we had a fun one with the manufacturer where there were a lot of factors that played into it, but the inciting incident was me not liking one of their products, and we sold another product of theirs, and they really didn't like that I didn't like one of their products. Now, keep in mind, the big AAA companies like Trijicon and Surefire and Aimpoint, like all those people know which products of theirs I don't like, and they don't care. They know that we will sell the ones that we like. We will sell a lot of them. We will make them a lot of money, and we will educate our customers on how that product is used. And I will also explain why other products from those companies aren't as good, in my opinion, and they're fine with it. They're cool with it. But some of these smaller companies just have a very hard time with that. They have a very hard time with authenticity. and recognizing like, hey, this person has conviction. They like this product a lot from us. In the process of liking it, they've made us a lot of money and they've educated a lot of people on it. They don't like this product over here, but that's okay because other people will like it. That's fine. So I've definitely had fallings out with a couple companies over that where I've just, again, refused to budge on, you're right, I'll like this other product because you guys want me to. It's no, I will tell our customers in the community what I believe about the product. People know I'm not for sale. I will say exactly what I think. And some companies have a very hard time working with people like that. It's very dangerous when you have someone who can't be bought with money. I would argue those people are the most dangerous because you just have to rely on their conviction to do things because you can't buy them. So, and I try to be that person. I don't want to be bought or swayed by money. I want to lead with conviction, and that's it. And so that's been interesting. But yeah, some of the larger companies don't care as much. There's certain things they won't do with me specifically because I am a very polarizing person. I saw Daniel Defense post. This is a fun example. They'll post on Instagram. They'll get 40 comments on a post, 50. I think they had 40 to post right before this one. And then they posted a video of me shooting one of their guns because I do like their guns. There were 1,100 comments. So what's that, 200 times? No, yes. Whatever the math is.
Amazing.
And sure enough, it was a debate on who's this kid? Lucas sucks, whatever, blah, blah, all stuff. And I mean, it is a way for them to get analytics and play the great algorithm is posting, because I'm a very controversial person. And I knew it. As soon as they posted it, I put it in my story and went, this is going to get spicy, just watch. And it was like 6 hours later, I was at home or something. I'm going to go see how this is. Yeah, 1,000 comments.
Yes.
And it's the debates about just everything. And
yeah.
So yeah, that's been interesting. I will say it took time for companies to see like, hey, even with the negatives that come with being associated with T-Rex Arms or Lucas because of this group of people that follow behind criticizing everything they do, the pros are outweighing that. But that takes time to show with track record that, because when you look at anyone, if you see this swirl of nastiness, you generally will assume, well, that person's just like nasty, right? You just assume it. But it takes years to see like, oh no, actually this person is still doing good. They're still reaching all these other people. It's a percentage of nasty people who are upset, but the percentage of the good outweighs the bad. And that took a few years working with some of the larger companies to demonstrate that. And then they were like, okay, cool. They're cool to work with. But yeah, you'll get 1,000 comments on your post if you're a large company and you post a video of me. That's just how it is.
Yeah.
So, and I wouldn't have it any other way. I much prefer being loved and hated than like the Keanu Reeves, who's just like liked by everyone and just kind of like gets along with everyone. I'm glad I'm not. Keanu Reeves is cool, and I thought about this a lot a couple years ago. Like, who do I want to be? How do I want to be seen by other people or whatever? And I just realized, nope, my job is to be the guy who says what I believe, even if it makes people upset, and stand by my convictions. People will hate me, people will love me, and that is fine. I don't need to be liked by everyone, lukewarm, like, oh, he's okay, he's kind of cool. I don't need that. And that's not what the community needs. I think the community needs less of those people and more very convicted individuals.
So you're in a very resilient position now. Like, the company has gotten quite large and you guys are doing well. But how did you get to that point from messing around with holsters in your garage? Because like a lot of people, I'm sure, are on that level, like trying, modding out their kits or like creating their own holster or something. But what was the journey from starting at that level to getting all the way to full-fledged company, production, everything you guys have?
It took much longer than people realize. So when I started, it was me in a garage, and I would look and see, did anyone order? Oh, cool, I got 2 orders. I got to go make these things. And then I would walk up to the little shop on my family's property and I would crank them out and then see if there was any emails, like look at Instagram. It's just a very different sort of job back then, but it took years. I mean, we sold only holsters for, I want to say 5 or 4, and we were just keeping up with demand, just making holsters. I think we had around 15 employees by the time we started our retail side, which was in 2018. And a lot of that, a lot of it required a division of labor. So I had to learn how to delegate, which was very hard early on when I started bringing people in, because I did everything. I did all the customer service. I did all the holster making. I buffed all the edges. I did all the form work. I did everything. And I realized I had to start like teaching people stuff and backing up and letting them do it. And it was very hard. One of the things that was very helpful was bringing two guys on as business partners. So one was one of my older brothers and one was a friend. My older brother handled the CFO money stuff because I don't know that stuff well. I can look at a P&L, but I'm not great with the financial number Excel spreadsheet stuff. That's not my gift and my job. And then the other guy ran operations and the holster side. So as soon as they got spun up and were able to really handle that and take care of it, I was able to just focus on new products, marketing, those are sort of I look at those as like the growth things that are needed to propel the company forward. The other things are important too, but it's more to maintain and kind of build systems. And because I was freed up, I was able to make some of that happen, like figuring out we need to do retail products. Here's how we'll do it better than other people. We'll take more photos. We'll educate people. I also got pretty good at shooting, which helped a lot early on because I want to say, I want to be careful claiming it, but I want to say I was the first or one of the first like CEO founder type people in the gun industry who could shoot quite well early on and would demonstrate that. I mean, I was the only person really demoing shooting like back then, hits and misses and all of that.
That's how I found you on Instagram. I had a random, algorithm spot, throw you on my timeline. I was like, oh, what's this? And then that's it.
That's very cool. Yeah. Oh. Instagram doesn't do that for us anymore. They don't let our content get shared to new people. So it's cool that you cashed in back when Instagram was cool.
Yes.
But that helps because like if you're good at if you're competent or you look competent, if you're competent, you'll attract people because they'll be interested or inspired by it. And so I was able to focus on that, which was great. And then I think by about 2018. I wasn't making holsters anymore. I could just focus on YouTube. I was cranking out videos, thinking about new products and, doing my creative. I'm a creative, like that's just how I do business, how I do things. And I was able to focus on that because of good people following behind who are handling the systems. And I think that's where a lot of founders make mistakes is they want to keep doing everything. They can't give it up. Or they hire the wrong people, but that's a mistake anyone can make. But they can't give it up. And because they can't give it up and do what the founder is good at, which there's different kinds. There's visionary founders, there's technician founders, there's all kinds of different kinds. But if you're a visionary type founder, you've got to give up stuff as soon as you can to go do the thing that builds the business and continues building the business instead of being in the process. And I'm even trying to figure out right now with my current job what that looks like. Like, do I need to stop filming videos as much? Do I need to think more like for the company in the future, projects and things in 3-4 years and less in the business day to day so that we could get ready for the next evolution? And so I'm actually trying to think about that right now, what that balance looks like of working in the business versus working on the business. And I've had to do that multiple times. I've had to change jobs 4 or 5 times. And so I'm kind of in that phase right now, trying to reevaluate the situation right now and see how that works. But yeah, getting people to come take over certain things, key things, people that are better than you were. I mean, everything everyone's doing that I used to do, they're doing it way better than I ever did. Like 100%, 200%, way better. So that's just something that you've got to be able to hand off. But it took time. It took a lot of time. I mean, every time I hear about another company that's about as old as we are, that's way bigger, I'm just like, part of me is like, man, did we not work hard enough? And then the other part of me is like, man, I'm really grateful. Like this thing worked out. Like I was hearing about Gymshark, which a kid, I think about my age, started 10 years ago, and it's a $1.2 billion company now. Same time frame. And I see that, and I'm like, should I feel bad that I chose guns instead of gym clothing? I don't. I wouldn't change anything. But it is just funny to look at other people in the same time frame get bigger now, or more successful. Now success is something to leave to be defined. But we've been very successful. We've done, and we've reached lots of people and inspired them, and that's big. So that is just very fun to kind of look at and think about. So it took time. It took a lot of time. I don't know if that kind of answers your question.
No, that's great. And that's so good. Yeah. Stepping away from the details, giving up that control and being able to look up and say, oh, wait, now I can actually think about where we need to go as a company. That's huge.
Yeah.
Were there other major like moments as you look back at the last 10 years where you're like, so bringing on those two partners was one. Are there other moments you saw where it's like, whoa, we kind of feels like we just kind of bumped up to another level?
So the big one was 2020. So we moved into a new building. We were making that transition, and I knew that was going to be big. Hey, we're moving out of this tiny little, I think it was like 5,000 square feet or less. I think it was 3. We're going to go to 10. We're going to move to town, which we're in Centerville. I mean, population like 30,000 people for the whole county. So we're moving to town, you know, and I knew that was going to be big. And then when COVID hit, we doubled staff and sales it just came in. So not only did we move into a new building, but we outgrew the building that year. Like I thought we'd be good for 3 years. I was like, oh, we got a new building. We'll be fine 4 years or so. And we were outgrown later that year. We needed to buy another one. And
so what was that? Was that like people staying home, Biden bucks, like people working on their stuff because they're there?
That's when I doubled down.
Okay.
The story I was telling you earlier about the person that helped me, that's related to you, that connected me with, you know, parts and guns and TRX arms, all that stuff. That's when I and pretty much every guy I know was like, TRXarms.com, here's my credit card. You know,
2020, what it was is, okay, I'm a silver linings guy. I feel like as a visionary, that's just, I'm not a futurist. I don't want to go to Mars. I'm not Elon Musk, but I do like to look at the silver linings of things. 2020 was great when it comes to, I guess red pilling is the right word, or black pilling, or whatever. What was happening? Yeah, what was happening for the since the sexual revolution in Hollywood and Marxism and all that? These people have been slowly conditioned to accept certain things in our society, like abortion being perfectly okay, murdering children. Like that took decades, but now it's considered completely normal and fine. What COVID did is it forced a bunch of issues and brought a lot of things to light and to the surface that people in the middle or people on the fence, or conservatives and people on the left as well, people on both sides, looked at how the government handled COVID and how other governments in the world handled COVID, and police departments up north saying we're not responding to 911 calls, you're on your own. There were so many things in 2020 that made people realize we can't trust the media. We can't necessarily trust the medical institutions. We can't trust law enforcement to be there for us always. We have to do a lot of things ourselves. And I think that I think in the future people will be able to look back at COVID and go, hey, that saved a lot of people from being slowly desensitized to problematic things that was already happening, and it basically flipped the switch for them as far as what's important and really what's going on here as far as being lulled to sleep by some of the ideologies that the left was pushing. So I've gone on multiple podcasts and said this. I think COVID was and it's hard to say because I know a lot of people died and people knew people who died from it. There were lots of bad things that happened, but you could still recognize the good that comes from something bad, and you should, in my opinion. I think COVID actually did a lot for people, but for our company just alone, I saw people realize, hey, owning guns is important. Being a prepared community is important. I mean, up until that point, they kind of thought it. Hurricane, Katrina came through and other little things, but COVID force-fed a lot of people like, hey, this is important. Like, you need to wake up. And that's why guns disappeared. Ammo became extremely expensive. Just things got crazy. And we doubled our staff, orders poured in. When the stimulus checks came in, there was definitely some additional orders as well for a few weeks. That I would say that definitely helped. Or not, because I'm not a huge fan of government money like that. But it definitely made a difference, for the economy or certain people in the economy. Mm-hmm. We'll pay for it later. We already are, but
No,
it was a wild time.
It was funny at the time. I definitely knew multiple people who They're seeing everything that's happening, very concerned. They get a check in the mail that they didn't ask for, didn't necessarily want. And they're like, what am I going to spend this on? I'm going to go
Night
buy some
vision,
guns.
yeah.
That's
I think
right.
what was it? Was it 1,200, 1,400? What was it? I can't
It
remember.
was. It depended if you had kids.
Yeah.
I had
yeah.
one son at the time, so I think it was like 600 per person. So we got like $1,800. And I was like, this is gonna make things worse. So I'm gonna buy insurance for when things get worse. So I'm gonna buy a gun, and so I bought a bunch of kit with it.
Well, what was cool? I'm a huge capitalist with a conscience, though, because capitalism, just like any freedom, it can go both ways, right? Double-edged sword. One thing we were able to do for our team members that was really cool. As COVID was happening, I mean, we knew what was going on, right? We didn't really know what was going to happen. But what we did realize for sure is the economy was starting to suck. Food was getting expensive. We figured there'd be a run on food even more. So we had a meeting and just said, hey, can we give out a stimulus check ourselves to team members to go out and buy stuff before, the inevitable happens? So I think it was like a month and a half in, we actually paid a bonus out to everyone in the company to go buy supplies. And we told them, like, hey, this is money, so you can go buy supplies right now because we don't know what's going to happen, but go and do this. And then it was like a year later, or it was like 6 months later, something like that the Biden checks came in. Was it? I guess it was Biden, right? I can't even remember anymore.
It was Trump bucks at the beginning,
Trump.
and then Biden bucks later.
Yeah.
So
Biden bucks later, yeah. But we were way ahead of the curve, way faster than the government when it came to helping our people out. So again, another point for why capitalism and the private sector will always be better than state financial donations.
Yes.
With a parentheses, donations.
Yes, donations. Taxed by takes tax from your grandchildren, right?
Yep. Oh, for sure.
Lucas, is it a temptation to rephrase? How do you guys decide what to invest in and what to get into as you get momentum? I mean, you guys were doing holsters for 5 years, and then you started adding products from other retailers. Then you launched. Well, this is all just me seeing the site. I was like, I've given you a lot of my money. Kit, nylon stuff. But then watching some of your videos, at some point you guys were thinking about doing uppers and milling your own farm parts. So why do you decide, especially as you're getting momentum, you're like, wow, we have a war chest, we can build stuff. Why do you decide what to go into and what to just say, you know what, this is not for us right now?
That's a great question. So we don't know. No, just kidding. We have some strategic anchors here in the company that helps with the decision making, and one of them is, or concepts, I should say, is we want to be the one-stop shop for the modern day Minuteman. So with that understanding, that right there helps us from running off into like, oh, let's go make a video game. Like, well, no. We're an e-commerce retail company for Minutemen. We're not trying to run off and do all these different things. As much as I'd like to import armored vehicles and sell them, which would actually fall into our strategic values, we don't have the capital for that, so we're not going to do that. But we have some very clarified goals for the company, and they have to be developed as we go as far as what products we bring in, right? So we know, hey, we've got to be able to be the one-stop shop for the modern day Minuteman, and what that means is we're going to need survival gear in the future. We're going to need firearms possibly in the future. We have a working group looking into that right now. Rifle uppers, night vision. There's a lot of products that it's not hard to figure out what we need to sell. It's more about when. And the win for me is when Trex can adequately offer information on that item, we're ready. So there are some items that we know we should sell to be that one-stop shop, but we don't have the education capacity in-house yet to adequately educate people on that product every week or every month. And I'm just like, you know what? Until we have that, let's go focus on things we can actually educate people on. Because that's one of our strategic anchors, is the best customer experience possible, which includes educating people on the product. So we have plenty of work laid out for us for another probably 5 years of adding stuff to our website to be that one-stop shop and adding educators who can talk about different things. after that, that's when we're going to have to really sit down and be like, okay, do we want to import armored vehicles from Ukraine because there's a surplus? Do we want to get into buying a firearms company and offering firearms? Do we want to, there'll be some big decisions then, but I kind of look at it as we got 5 years of work right now of, bringing in retail products and manufacturing certain things. None of those moves are big. They're not really. I mean, night vision, we're talking it's a few $100,000 to do a thing, or we had a purchase with one vendor before Black Friday that was about 800 grand for retail products, but none of those moves are that big because it's stuff we're already doing that we can forecast. It's the new projects like if you want to start a training division or start firearms manufacturing, like that would be a whole new silo, like a whole new company basically. Those are the ones that we talk about here and there, but as far as our main strategy, like we've probably got 5 years of just adding stuff to our website and capability to our site before we're sort of done, and then have to go, okay, now what? What are we doing here? And we've talked about purchasing other companies, doing some vertical integration, other companies that are within our area of what we're doing. That's just going to have to be assessed on a case by case basis. And then starting other arms of the company like training or whatever happens to be. But we have a very planned trajectory right now, which is nice. It's very smooth. It's kind of the 20-mile march concept. We're not trying to get big real fast. We're taking it very consistently and smoothly. I don't want to say carefully because I don't like carefulness, but kind of carefully, right? We're not overextending. We're not taking out massive debt or lines of credit. We're a debt-free company, so we can do some things other people can't. And there's some things we can't do because we don't have unlimited money to just go out and buy a $20 million firearms company, or $50 million, $100 million, whatever it is. We don't just have money to throw at things like that. But so yeah, it's pretty well defined, at least for the next 5 years. And then after that, there'll be some discussions on, what's next? Are we doing retail storefronts? Are we buying these other companies? Are we doing armored vehicles? Are we doing, and I'm also looking into starting other companies potentially that aren't even in the firearms space. Personally, just some other things as well, because I do like business. I like the things that come with that. And there are some other areas I'd like to get into that aren't even firearms related. And so I'm looking into those right now because Trex is on a very steady trajectory. And there's some other things I could probably do at the same time. Well, I'm hoping I can do at the same time. We'll see. But nice. That's another conversation for another day. So
yeah, no, that's exciting. You almost leaked it.
Yeah, pretty much.
As people know, you leak products and such. You mentioned armored vehicles. Can you talk more about that?
So that's a big one, right? That's like, hey, Minutemen need armored vehicles. They're like $300,000. They're get a group together, do a group buy, whatever.
Right.
It's kind of it's a very like far out concept to think about, but that's how big I want us as a company to be thinking. I mean, if there's no one in the firearms community that offers surplus, not really, good surplus armored vehicles and instructions on how to use them, and even a funding mechanism or education on that. Like, hey, get your 8 buddies, save up, buy one, train with it, know how to use it, maintain it, have a couple of you are mechanics, and that's just, people aren't ready for that, right? If I were to dump that in their lap, like, hey, we just started this company, like that would take years of education before we launch that. But that's how big I want people in the company to be thinking, and that's how big I'm thinking is, hey, what can we do in 5 years, and what should the community have access to? Is really how I look at things. I think backwards. I go, what is optimal community like access to equipment or gear, and then what do we need to do to get there? And there's some things that'll always be out of reach, like say helicopter gunships. It's just too financially expensive for the average person to get into, unless they're super independently wealthy. And even then, it's like, is it really that good of an investment? Some of those things are just out of reach. But then again, John Paul Jones had his own warships during 1775, during the American War for Independence. And I definitely like the idea of certain citizens who are very successful in business, being very successfully prepared for things in the future and having some of those assets. But I don't know of any citizens who have the kind of money to afford an aircraft carrier. I don't know of any with nuclear reactors and things.
Yeah, not at that level.
Not yet. Maybe I'll try to do that. I'll try to do that here in 30 years. But
I mean, Eric Prince did have a couple choppers in Iraq, as part of his organization. So people can't get to that level. Does it really need to cost $300,000 for an armored vehicle? That's just like the straight government surplus?
Yeah. There are cheaper ones. A lot of it's importing stuff from over there. But I've looked into buying armored vehicles here stateside, like Tahoes and like stuff like that. And
gotcha.
Getting armor added is 50 to 60 grand, and then there's some other upgrades, and you can do it. It's not the same as a BTR or a Striker or something like that. If citizens realize that's a capability they needed, I'm not even convinced they do, for how citizens would probably need to fight if something ever happened in the future. But that's also one of the goals. My goal is the fighting never has to happen. That would be optimal. A battle of Runnymede type situation where there's just so many people who are armed and upset with what's going on that the government or a foreign power can't do anything, because they know, one, they can't ever win against a populace that is so ideologically opposed to them and armed. And so no fighting ever happens. I mean, that's ultimately my goal, is so many people are armed it might be armored vehicles. It might just be small arms. It might be other stuff that the government realizes we can't do it. There's too many 3D printers. There's no way we can ban firearms. That's ultimately the goal of the company, is create the best deterrent possible to prevent rights from being taken in the future, without fighting ever needing to happen. That's my goal. It's our goal here at the company. It's worked so far. We haven't had, people might argue 2020 the fighting started, but or 2021 I should say. But the fighting hasn't happened in mass across the country. So to some extent it has worked so far, having with how many guns we have in the country, 400 million or whatever it is. But I want to pump those numbers up and make sure it stays that way for my kids and their kids, and then who knows, maybe someday there'll be a civil war, I'm sure, in the future at some point, but I hope that's not the case. So that's the grand plan.
Lucas, hearing you talk about all this stuff, I mean, you guys are it's amazing what you guys are doing to equip the serious citizens, but you're also in an incredibly regulated space. ATF does audits, because you're an FFL SOT. I mean, what is it like to be both sort of like equipping? I'm going to use a kind of a half-baked analogy here. Equipping Rohan as Sauron is like keeping his eye on you. You're equipping the militia. The guys are going to go fight, or not fight, but just like exercise their duties. Be ready. Not to the government, just in general. But then the government itself is like observing you, auditing you, tracking you, making sure that you guys are playing by the rules. What's that like?
Yeah, it's not great. And a lot of people in the firearms community don't understand it. Like, for example, I pay taxes. Guess what? A lot of people do. Most people do. And that already alone is, the kind of taxes we have right now are definitely unconstitutional and probably also very unbiblical as well. But we are abiding by the law of the Romans right now, for the most part, or all part really. And that's not great. I do not like it at all. And there is an element of, we can peacefully resist. We could do the thing, peacefully resist, but also do good in the process and prepare for the future and help people out. And so that is very hard for me sometimes, because people say like, oh, well, you have an FFL, you're paying special money to own machine guns. You're a hypocrite. And it's like, well, you're right. I paid $2,500 to the ATF to own machine guns so that I can make content saying why machine guns should be legal and showing people that machine guns are good and that they're not evil and horrible. You're right. I'm paying a little bit of money to the government so I can do this without going to prison, because that wouldn't do anyone any good if I go to prison. I mean, I'm going to stop all the efforts I'm doing of helping hundreds of thousands of millions of people. So there are these small sacrifices or prices to pay. And I think they're strategic, and I think a lot of people think about it that way. That's okay. At some point, though, there is that line of, no, I will not do this thing. I can't do this thing. It's not right. And most people don't know what that is. I don't know what that is for certain issues. Like I really don't. I won't train the ATF. I won't do that. In certain government agencies, if they ask, I do have some lines in the sand there. But yeah, it's tough. It's tough knowing that we have to abide by certain laws that are not good in order to do the good work that we are doing. And it can feel a little hypocritical at times, but it can also feel strategic, because I do think there's strategic value to the community with us having an SOT and getting suppressors very fast to talk about, having machine guns to talk about. And if the ATF decides to take that from us, fine. We won't have that capability anymore. I'll figure out how to do it some other way. But yeah, it is something that gets talked about pretty often. And a lot of people don't get it because they don't own a business. They're not in our space. They don't have a target on their back. Most gun owners don't actually have a target on their back. I mean, they own a gun. That's it. Lots of people do. It's the people like me and other folks and businesses who really have targets on their back, who are going out of their way to say and do certain things that will result in government scrutiny. And a lot of people just don't understand that. And I'm down for more gun owners standing up and doing what we're doing and painting a target on their back. I would love it if there were thousands more. But most people just kind of piddling around on Instagram. They're not who the government is really watching or concerned about. It is more the people like me or similar people or similar companies that will get scrutiny. Well, definitely get scrutiny first. So it's a big responsibility. I'm not scared by it because it's how the game is played right now. But it's definitely something that I do think about pretty often.
Yeah, that makes sense. I mean, the way I like to think about any situation to serve like this is you use the sword of the giant to slay the giant, wherever it fits. To me, it seems like that kind of scenario.
Yep.
Yeah.
For sure.
So, Lucas, in our last 5 minutes or so, what's next for Trex Arms? You guys just celebrated 10 years. Your CEO, what are you focusing on over the next 2 to 5 years here?
So actually the big news, because you just said something that is factually wrong, although most people don't know, we actually have a new CEO, which is super exciting.
Okay.
Again, kind of like I talked about with the whole figuring out what my new job is and what was pretty big for me, I'd say a couple of years ago was realizing, I wanted to be the CEO of the company. I wanted to be the guy that spearheaded everything and ran everything and was that guy. And it was tough to realize that I wasn't that guy. I wasn't necessarily good at certain operational things, managing certain parts of the business, but that I was very good at other parts, the visionary type parts, and looking further ahead and understanding what's going on. And that was a few years ago that I had to wrestle with that and kind of come to that conclusion. And recently we determined, hey, well, we need a CEO guy. We need a guy who can, make decisions and can do certain things. And we had a guy who started here in the company at the bottom at making holsters back, I want to say it was 8 years ago. And he's worked his way up to management, operations, on the executive team, on the board. And he's a former Marine Colonel, fighter pilot. Great guy, aligns with our core values, our messaging. The coolest thing about him, to be honest, is when he came here, he wasn't, I would say, as developed with some of his Second Amendment, the mission, and what's going on with the company, right? A lot of people weren't, right? But then after being in the company and after seeing what can be done here at the company, he evolved in his thinking as far as, what's at stake here with Trex Arms. We're not just a company making holsters. There's a lot more we can do. And we have a number of team members here in the company who've gone through that process. So if they came in, they kind of liked guns, they carried maybe, and now they're fully invested in what the company can do. That's the coolest thing to see with people who show up, they don't fully understand, don't fully get it. And then 3 years later, they're in meetings arguing. I'm arguing with someone else a philosophical point, and I'm like, dang, I don't think you would have done that 3 years ago, but here you are doing it right now. It's just the coolest thing ever. So he's the acting CEO right now. He's going to be doing that moving forward. I'm the CBO visionary guy. I do Lucas things is kind of the best way to put it. But that is an organizational restructure thing that is very new for us because we've kind of had some group groupthink, group sort of management at the top. And now we're moving to a structure of one guy who's kind of really running the operational side of the company. And I'm looking forward to that. So I technically work for him, actually, technically is how it works. And that's super fun. But it'll allow me to focus on what I'm good at. It's allowing other people to focus on what they're good at while he's handling a lot of the operational side. And again, that is something that a lot of companies make mistakes on, is the founder wants to always be at the top and be the guy. And if that job is not fit for him, he needs to step aside for someone better for the sake of the entire organization and the mission. So, and a bunch of us have done that. We've stepped aside for different people to do that job better, and then we go do what we're good at, the owners and the partners. So that's fun. I'm looking forward to seeing how the company evolves under his leadership, and I'm helping him on things, and I'm doing my stuff. So that's really the most exciting thing for me for 2024. Is evolving the company more into a corporate structure, corporate leadership, and seeing where that goes and how that goes as the company evolves and gets ready for what I'm going to assume is another year of explosive growth. It's probably next year. It's going to be a wild. This election is going to be weird. I mean, it's already shaping up to be very weirder than the ones before, at least that I've been alive for. Plus the wars going on. I mean, there's a lot. The economy on top of that, all these compounding effects. So I'm really just trying to make sure the company is ready for that and helping our new CEO with that. Because I think it's going to be a rambunctious time for everyone. And I just want to make sure we can help as many people as possible through that, whether it's maybe the economy is so bad we've got to work on bringing in cheap products. Maybe that's where we fit in. Maybe we just need to educate people on what not to buy, and that's where we fit in if the economy gets really bad. So there's going to be a lot of opportunity. That's what I'm most excited for, is the opportunity for next year, and just seeing what happens. Writing, whatever happens.
Yes, whatever happens, it'll be fun. That's at least interesting. Let's call it.
It'll be fun to watch. That's for sure. Now, living through it for some people, yes. Maybe not, but
yeah. So well, Lucas, thanks so much for coming on. And this is just from somebody that's shopped at TRX. Everyone listen to this. Go to TRX Arms. We'll put the links in the show notes. They are the best resource to get into guns. If you don't know what you're buying, if you don't know anything about it, but you feel like you need to get into it, I cannot recommend TRX Arms enough. Again, dude, thanks so much for coming on.
Appreciate that. And thank you for your support over the years.
Of course.
Really appreciate that here. Yeah.
Yeah, absolutely. My pleasure. Thanks, man.
Good stuff. Thanks for having me on.
Thanks for listening to this episode of the New Founding Podcast. New Founding has become a rallying point for founders and investors who are taking serious bets in the face of a stagnant business culture. Our venture fund backs founders building dynamic companies, powered by American ideals and a positive national vision. These are the kinds of founders that embody the optimism and competence of the people who come on this podcast. If you're interested in investing in our fund, check out newfounding.com/venture fund and follow the link to apply.